Hello, folks. Welcome. Welcome in. Bienvenue. Nice to see some familiar faces in the CBR program. Bienvenue tout le monde. Just gonna wait a couple minutes for folks to filter in to the online room. Feel free as we're getting started to change your name in the chat. You can put the organization or municipality you're with beside. You can use mine as an example if you like. Really pleased to have you all here. La session est offerte en français aussi. Vous pouvez sélectionner l'option qu'on a craint. Choisis le français option. Aussi, il y a interprétation et je vais expliquer comment ça marche avant. C'est le section en haut le screen interprétation. Et sélectionner ça, puis changer la langue en français ou anglais, comme tu veux. So just to let everyone know, today's session will be bilingual. You can select your language of choice. And so you all know you can select the French or English deck to view in the View Options shared screens and choose English or Français at your preference. Welcome, folks. All right, we're gonna get kicked off here as folks trickle in. Good to see you all. Lots of people, lots of Ontarians, lots of folks from the prairies. Hello, Wesley. Nice to see you. Some familiar faces in the CBR advisory service program. So very happy to have you. And we can get kicked off, Natalie. So some housekeeping. As I mentioned, we have simultaneous interpretation available. So you can select French or English. L'interprétation simultanée est disponible pour écouter en français ou en anglais. Vous pouvez choisir l'interprétation à votre écran, puis choisir ça. Questions and answers at the end, but also, as you can see, the chat is open. So feel free to ask questions and reach out to folks. Important that we're all able to talk to each other. So vous pouvez poser des questions et réponses à la fin, mais aussi on va avoir l'option de juste parler avec quelqu'un quand tu veux. And lastly, we have an anonymous Q&A box. So if you have a question, but you don't, but you want to stay anonymous, you can add it. So posez des questions dans la boîte questions-réponses Q&A et ajoutez le commentaire dans la boîte de discussion pour le chat. C'est ton choix. Okay, Natalie, next slide, please. Thank you. And a little bit about the Green Municipal Fund. Some of you may know us, the Fund Municipal Vert, the FCM. We support innovative municipal sustainability projects such as this across Canada through funding, resources, and training. Puis comme ça c'est avec l'initiative RBL for all of the information that you would like to learn about FCM, you can check it out. And we're going to be posting some things specific for this program. And just to let you all know, for those unfamiliar, this is part of a series of free training and offer by FCM for anyone in the CBR program. And we have a lot more coming, including free trainings from CIET and other certification agencies. So please check it out. We have lots to offer. with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Catherine Wilson, esteemed partner of GMF, working with us for the past year, sharing their excellent work with the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge. Super happy to have them here, and we hope you all enjoy the expertise and wisdom that MMC and Enerlife bring to the room today. They've been doing this for a long time, so happy to have you. Over to you, Catherine.
Thanks very much, Corey. Hi, everyone. As Corey mentioned, my name is Catherine Wilson. I am the program manager of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge, a collaborative, data-driven program for municipalities working together to improve energy efficiency and environmental performance in their own buildings. I'm also the manager of this net zero cohort project for indoor pool facilities. Just to provide you a bit of background, there's 4 pillars of the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge program: energy management, knowledge, peer networking, and recognition. So in terms of energy management, we have an extensive database of all types of municipal buildings that we use to benchmark facilities, determine customized energy efficiency targets, and associated savings potential for individual facilities to really help municipalities focus their efforts. This analysis is performed on all buildings participating in the program, including the pools participating in this cohort project. In terms of knowledge, the program content is really member-driven, and our cohort projects, including this one, were requested by the member municipalities. And we really believe in sharing the knowledge, so we always share the learnings from our cohort projects through webinars like this one today. We also develop and lead municipal-focused webinars on low-carbon technologies, such as air source heat pumps, geothermal, heat recovery for ice rinks and pool facilities, best practices in building automation systems, and electrification, to name just some. These webinar topics were also requested by the members, and the learnings applied to this cohort project and others as well. And really fundamental to our program is the sharing of knowledge and best practices between members. So we conduct member networking sessions for municipalities to share best practices, challenges, opportunities, and lessons learned with their peers. And peer networking is also essential for our cohort projects. So as we know, deep retrofitting existing buildings to net zero can be expensive, requiring technical expertise and training that can be cost prohibitive for individual facilities. But the cohort approach works by allowing us to pool public funding and private sponsorship while leveraging the collective genius of each municipality, along with industry experts and academia. So really working together in an integrated process, participants can have greater confidence knowing the outcomes can be implemented. So we find that a wider range of expertise, experience, and insights result in better, more effective solutions than figuring out alone. So next slide, I'd like to welcome today's speakers. So we have Frank Camilleri, Vice President of the Climate Challenge Network, who will walk us through the pools cohort process, including the overall results and lessons learned along the way. We'll also be hearing from the participating municipalities. So we have Adam McMullen from the City of Barrie, Deepak Adhikari from the City of Richmond Hill, and Curtis Dina from the City of Brampton, participating in a panel discussion to share their insights and experience. So thanks in advance to all of today's speakers. We really appreciate you taking the time to join our discussion today. Next slide. So this cohort project would not have been possible without our generous sponsors, Ainsworth Incorporated, Armstrong Fluid Technology, and Odell Associates. So each were actively involved in the low carbon plan for each of the participating pools based on their area of expertise. They provided input and technical advice for the measures and commented on the overall project findings. And the technical direction of the cohort was provided by Enerlife Consulting. Next slide. So after the welcome and introductions, we'll dive right into the results and lessons learned from the project. This will be followed by a panel discussion with the participating municipalities who will speak to the experience from a municipal perspective. We'll then have time for audience questions, followed by the closing remarks. And I'd now like to turn it over to Frank Camilleri, who will walk us through the project.
Great, thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it. Lots to cover here. A very interesting cohort project here, and happy to share that with the rest of the group over here. Let's get started. So now we can go to the next slide. Yes, perfect, great. Why community centers with indoor pools? I mean, Catherine obviously mentioned that it was a request from the members, but a couple of reasons. Indoor pools are very important to community centers, as well as we know that they have a huge impact on emissions. They use a lot of energy, typically gas. So again, great candidate to be doing this cohort project with. Next slide. So I want to highlight the 4 participating pools. We have one from the city of Barrie, Allendale Recreation Center, that has a pool, as well as a couple of ice rink pads. Chincozy Wellness Center from the city of Brampton, and we have a couple of the facilities from the city of Richmond Hill, Bayview Hill Community Center, and Centennial Pool. We'll talk more about these in more detail as we progress through the slide deck. Next slide. So just describing the process and the approach that we followed here. These are practical pathways to net zero carbon building. So we start off with step 1. We go through this whole process. Actually, we start up with step 1, which focuses on operational excellence, kind of making the most of the existing equipment that you have. Continuing on, there is dealing with and addressing energy retrofits, end of life replacements. And looking at low carbon equivalents for those end of life replacements. Then we move on to heat recovery, which is again focusing on not allowing any heat to dissipate through the building without recovering as much of it as possible. Then we focus on step 3, which is on-site renewables, so we'll talk about that as well. And then the last step, which is renewable credits and carbon offsets. Good. Next slide. So the objectives of the pilot started off with setting carbon reduction goals for these pool facilities. Each of the municipalities had slightly different goals, all met with the minimum requirements for the FCM funding for feasibility studies of low carbon plans. We used a zero overtime carbon approach, basically doing it over the 30-year period, and we presented a solution, one of the pathways that aligned very much with the equipment end of life, renewal replacement. In order to evaluate the low carbon opportunities, we compared it to a business as usual, and we'll get a little bit more into what business as usual was defined here as well. Focus on an integrated design process, as Catherine touched upon it, getting all stakeholders involved, not only from the specific municipality, but we had the opportunity to share experiences from different municipalities at each of these workshops, and important to get the internal buy-in from this, from all people's perspectives. And one of the main focuses initially was to identify immediate operational improvements. Good. Next slide. The process first started off with some data collection. Before we went on site, we wanted to make sure that we had a lot of information, or as much information as we could get, review it, just to make the site visit more streamlined and more efficient. Once we collected as much information as we could, we performed a site visit to validate some of the information that we had collected already, but really getting to know the operations of the building. So interviewing the operators, interviewing the facility managers to really get an appreciation for how the building is operated. Based on that, then we came back and we developed some preliminary measures, and we had our first integrated design workshop where we had lots of stakeholders, and where we present some initial ideas of the measures that we want to do, so to run it by them, get their perspective, get their feedback, and incorporate any things that we perhaps haven't thought of, as well as refining the measures to suit their specific needs. After the sort of that technical first workshop, we performed analysis and created some costing savings and presented it to the capital folks. So actually, it was everyone, including the capital folks, where we presented the financials to that, and then final reports came out of that as well. So that's the process. The overall findings, just in a nutshell, net zero carbon emissions is achievable and financially feasible in municipal community centers with indoor pools. About 80% of the way there is fairly financially attractive. The last 10 or 20% can be not as financially attractive, but we'll go through and I'll highlight some of the areas that are that explain this a little bit better. It does require, again, planning in advance. That's why we look at a 30-year time horizon. And it's good to get everyone's feedback, because this is a long time horizon that we're looking at. And again, very important to get that to get the findings and everyone on board on this. Next slide. So these are the four pools here. The three different the three different bars. The green bars in the center there are the emissions, starting off emissions. So the 2019 baseline emissions that we referenced. You can see there's quite a wide range, ranging from 179 tons right up to 648. So again, wide range, because the facilities were of varying types. But you can see we presented the 5-year emissions and a 20-year emissions reduction targets that we achieved through this. And you can see the 5 and the 20 are pretty well the same. The 5-year is more of an aggressive plan, and it emulated most of the times the 20-year plan, right? So again, all approach to achieve net zero in each of in the 20-year plan, and in most of them in the 5-year plan as well. Good. Energy performance target. So 10-year target, we started off, there's a 10-year target that we tried to achieve. Most municipalities had a specific target in mind, either 50% or 80% target. You can see here the first bars in each one of the pools is what the baseline represents. So the blue is the electrical, the orange is the thermal. Then the bar below it is what the target was set for at the 10-year mark. And you can see that the biggest change from the first bar in each of the pools to the second bars is a focus on reducing considerably the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the gas side. So that was pretty well consistent with all 4 facilities here. Next slide. Measure scenarios. So to summarize, we developed 3 main categories of scenarios. There's business as usual measures. And then there's a low carbon approach with and without funding. We presented those, as well as an aggressive low carbon approach with funding. And that was the 5-year aggressive plan that I talked about beforehand here. So we'll get into more of the details of which one is in the following slides. Next. Good. Business as usual measures. Basically, it's just a standard like for like replacement of equipment at the end of life. No optimizations of the existing systems were considered. Those are the operational things that I was talking to you about from a low carbon perspective. No heat recovery was considered, and no consideration made for any renewables as well, right? So kind of existing, continuing on to doing what it normally does. Next slide. The low carbon approach without funding, identifying all different types of low carbon measures, maximizing efficiency, as we talked about, using heat recovery where it made sense, and really focused on replacing equipment at end of life, at least for the 20-year plan. The aggressive one just, we'll talk about later, but that just condensed it all. Includes implementing operational measures first, the importance of that we talked about, doing that first, get the most out of your equipment right now. And then we highlighted, measures and identified them as part of the pathway that made, technical and financial sense, or some that made financial sense right away, even though they were a little bit capital intensive. Next slide. Low carbon with funding is pretty well the same as low carbon without funding, but we ended up leveraging the funding that's available through FCM's Community Buildings Retrofit Program. So again, focused on the low carbon measures using that funding because that's what it subsidizes. So that was the difference between the low carbon with and without funding. Now, in order to evaluate measures, the concept of life cycle costing is very important, and was relied upon heavily. The days of simple payback when looking at net zero just don't quite make sense anymore. So again, life cycle costing, just to recap, it's a decision-making process. You use life cycle costing, in particular net present value, which looks at the total cost of ownership, not just the initial cost, and not just a few years of cost, but over the life of the equipment. And it takes into consideration, utility, maintenance, carbon taxes, as well as other considerations, emissions reductions in the grid, and so forth. Emissions vary throughout the grid. We looked at a 30-year time period. 30-year time period was chosen for a couple of reasons. One of them is because it allowed for replacement of any major piece of equipment at least once. And it aligns well with the 2050 sort of the target of emissions to be net zero, that we're all aiming for to avoid the high temperature increase in global warming temperatures. Next slide. And for the life cycle costing, here are some standard assumptions. Each municipality had their specific tweaks to this, and this is what we would recommend that anyone else do, is make it appropriate and customized for your facility. So there's inflation that takes into consideration, escalation rates for the different utilities. Talked about maintenance of labor. We identified any ones that had some really key maintenance. Discount rate that we use in it, and again, we talked about a 30-year amortization period. We use the carbon pricing assumptions produced through the federal government there, and the fuel emission factors. We started off, these were the initial factors to establish the baseline, but in the analysis we ended up using the forecast for the emissions for the grid to take that into consideration, and we start off with the current utility rates that each of the municipalities had or are currently experiencing based on 2021 rates. Good. Next slide. So this is just one of a sample of the measures. So again, we provided 3 different options here. We provided the business as usual, and you can see all the net present values for each of these systems that these measures corresponded to. They actually produce a negative NPV. The interpretation of net present value in this case here is a change to any change from the existing operation. So if there was any expenditures, like there is replacement of equipment, that's automatically a negative. If there aren't any savings associated with anything, then it remains negative. That's why, again, business as usual, you'll see all negative measures, negative NPV, sorry. The low carbon approach without funding has a variety of NPVs, and you'll see that some are positive, some are negative. The real comparison is the NPV compared to the business as usual alternative. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of financial feasibility, you'll see that not every single measure in the low carbon plan, especially heating and cooling, is still one that's being worked on, and the technology is not quite there. It's pretty expensive. That in isolation is not as financially attractive as the business as usual, at least in current days. But most of the other measures are. You can see that the net present value is either less negative, if you will, or positive compared to the business as usual. One of the things I just want to highlight is the renewable section. That one there, you'll see that the renewable shows a large negative. That is because we combined 2 things. There's in order to get the building to net zero, typically we had to use solar PV on the on the car parking, and that is really expensive right now because you have to build structural. But the solar PV that's usually on the roof has a really good net present value. So that's what I was referring to when I said that, when you want to get it right to zero, that incremental cost of solar PV on the parking lot, that in itself can be pretty expensive. That's what contributed to the negative NPV over here. Okay, you can see here just highlighting the bottom there. The low carbon approach with funding has a negative NPV of negative 13 million versus business as usual at negative 16.9 million, right? So good. So next slide. Yeah. So these are just some just to explain and visualize the concept of each of the different scenarios. So we have business as usual cash flow, where you can see there's just expenditures, but the dotted line over there is the cumulative cash flow. So there really are no savings associated with this measure. So you can see it keeps with each expenditure, it keeps getting more and more negative, and you kind of settle in and around the negative 3 million mark over there. Now, next slide. This is in contrast to the low carbon approach without funding. You can see when there are expenditures, you'll see that there are some slight savings associated with this. So the green bars there are savings, while the blue bars that you'll see there are capital expenditures and the timing in which they occur. And you can see the dotted line is the cumulative cash flow, and you can see that it's there are drops every time there is a capital replacement, but you can see that the slope is curving to the right because there are savings associated with this. You'll see that the cash flow ends up being around the negative 6 million without funding, We can look at the next slide. It talks about the low carbon with funding. And this one over here, similar to the one with without funding, except for that you reduce your costs, your initial cost significantly on the measures because of the funding that's available, and you end around the -3 million, which is close to the business as usual. This doesn't take into consideration the time value of money. The net present value really takes care of that more accurately. But this is just an illustration to see, as municipalities like to look at cash flow for each of for the next 30 years with each of these plans. So next slide. This here is just an aggressive timeline where we implement a lot of the measures up in the first year. I'm sorry, within the next 5 years, and you can see that it kind of breaks even because a lot of the savings come through early on. They accumulate over the life of the 30 years. So again, this doesn't take into consideration the time value of money, but it gives you perspective on cash flow, and which the municipalities were really interested in observing. Good. Next slide. So again, a little bit more about the pools. We identified there's 4 pools or participating pools in here, and you can see the varying square footage varying from as small as 20,000 square feet in pool number 3 to as large as the building pool number 4, which was over 120,000 square feet. We wanted to highlight the relative size of the pool. Pools generally, from a density perspective, from a square foot perspective of intensity, they generally use more energy than typical regular space in community centers. So the relative proportion of it in the building is important in terms of understanding greenhouse gas emissions. You can see here on the last column there, it varies right from a small percentage, like 3.3%, right to as much as in pool 3, 20%. So you're going to see varying impacts of the pool measures on each of these facilities. Next slide. So some of the metrics that are very important to look for opportunities are a handful over here that we'll talk about. So we talk about, first of all, we want to focus on the main pools. So each of the facilities had a main pool. 3 of them, I think, had a teaching pool, which we'll talk about next. But we look at turnover rates. Turnover rates, it has to do with the pumping and how many times you turn over the water within the actual pool itself. And you can see here that there's, again, from pools 4, 3, 2, 1, you can see there a wide range of turnover rates. And on the chart to the slight right of that, you talk about we highlight the amount of turnover rates, excess, if you will. So you can see that pool number 4 was very, very little excess, close to 0%. While the other ones actually had some good opportunities for reducing flows, also while maintaining water clarity and meeting emissions. And we'll get into a little bit more of the details of that in a few other slides. Evaporation rate, there you see the center slide at the bottom there. Again, wanted to highlight that there's quite a bit of variation within each of these pools of the amount of evaporation. We tried to normalize that on a per square foot of pool area so that we could make it comparable. But you can see this wide range here highlighted some potential for opportunities. So on the ones with the higher side, looked for opportunities in set points for air, water, and relative humidity. And we'll talk a little bit more about the guidelines that we used for helping find opportunities in this area here. Next slide. Again, leisure teaching pool system metrics. So as I mentioned, 3 out of the 4 had a leisure pool associated with the facility as well. These ones here have higher turnover rates, and 2 out of the 3 were again over pumping. One of them was just slightly in and around the break-even mark, but it was good information for them to know that they were just slightly lower and that they would try to increase that a little bit. Again, access from pool 1, pool 3 is showing opportunities for improvement, opportunity for operational improvements and efficiency improvements. The evaporation rates on leisure pools, again, just showing the wide range that you get over here. And this one here is a little bit, you can see at higher rates than the main pool because the temperatures are higher in these types of pools than they are with just the main pools, right? Okay. Next slide. Just continue on to some system metrics that again help identify some potential opportunities. So we looked at all pools had dehumidifiers, mechanical dehumidifiers, which is essential in a place in these types of environments that have a lot of humidity. You can see that we tried to normalize it and make them comparable. So we looked at the air volume, so the cubic feet per minute, the CFM, per cubic meter of air volume in the space, just to make them comparable to see if we saw any deviation. You can see there's quite a bit of variation going as low as 1.9 CFM per cubic meter to as high as 2.8. What this showed us is that there was perhaps some opportunities to use VFDs with dehumidifiers, and one of the participants actually was in the process of going through a retrofit where they were replacing their dehumidifier, and the VFD they insisted on having it, and we agreed. For this reason over here, there's opportunities that you can see that you could reduce the airflow, especially in lower dehumidification requirements. Next slide. So we try to get a little bit of an indication of emissions reduction by pool and system. So you can see here, again, lots of colors here, but I just want to highlight 2 or 3 different ones here just to show the relative magnitudes of them. So by far, the heating and the cooling ones, the blues that you see, sort of the first of the stacked columns is by far the greatest. But it's important to note too that the ones that also contribute quite a bit are pool, which is the orange. It's quite material on each one of them, not as high obviously as the heating and cooling, but the dehumidification too, because the dehumidification is associated with the pool. So if you were to combine the dehumidification and the pool on each one of them, you get to a significant impact. I mean, not as high as the heating and cooling, but you can see how important and how it is to focus on getting the pool right in the pool environment right as part of the whole building and reducing the emissions. Next slide. So again, we looked at just the 3 facilities just to give you some perspective, make it more comparable. Typically where the emission savings occurred by system, again, we'll get into more of the details of the measures that follow, but again, heating and cooling was the big part there, and pools and dehumidification. Sort of, if you combine those two, those would be good. And next to that would be just ventilation in the building as well. Again, ventilation is usually a big part of these. It's not as big if you didn't have a pool. So, but again, just trying to put things in relative perspective in terms of where the opportunities are. Next slide. So some recommendations that we'll make, and again, we'll get into a little bit more of the details of the measures, but those that are considering performing a similar study in which there is FCM funding for, again, some of the key things to keep in mind. What was really critical to the process is getting organized. There's a lot of information to gather, and the more information that you have gathered and the documentation that you have early on just makes the whole process easier. Again, we talked about it, getting everyone involved with the integrated process. This is the way you get everyone's perspective, so you get buy-in and deal with it up front. So if there's any issues, you deal with them right away. So you get buy-in through all of the later stages in the process as well. Life cycle costing we talked about. Again, we talked about operational low-cost measures first. And so integrate those. BAS, building automation system, is really critical for getting to net zero, especially on the operational side of things. And so we were fortunate enough in these facilities, they all had some form of building automation system. But some that don't, it's one of those things that you need to consider. And heat recovery, maximizing that is really essential in this process. Next slide. Okay, so lots of information here. My understanding, we're going to be sharing the slide deck, so I won't go through every single little item, but just wanted to highlight some of the key areas of pieces of information that are really important. Obviously, performance data, interval data if you have it, monthly data, and if there is some sub-metering, we were fortunate enough that there was some sub-metering in some of these facilities to give us some perspective on certain pieces of equipment. Just understanding if there was any tracking going on with any performance there. Drawings are really important, just so we understand, the mechanical systems, the electrical systems better, to understand where the systems, so that we can make recommendations. If you're fortunate enough to have a building automation system, trend logs were important. Each one of these facilities had varying degrees of trend logs. Any previous audits, if they were fairly recent, just helped the process. And some of them, they had lighting audits done recently, so that was all useful and making the process more efficient. Understanding operating schedules and any building condition assessments combined with the asset management plan. Those two go hand in hand to, as we mentioned earlier, that we try to align the replacements of equipment with low carbon alternatives based on end of life. That was one of the key, the normal 20-year time horizon pathways that we examined. So again, a lot of information, but if you get organized early on with most of this information, it just makes the whole process easier. Next slide. We touched upon the integrated design process again without getting to every single item there, but we were fortunate to have many of these stakeholders involved in each of the meetings. We know that Enerlife was acting as sort of the technical advisor and the modeling with the sponsors that were experts in their own field. We had capital, particularly at the second workshop. We had project managers that implement projects there for the municipalities. We had the energy group, we had the building operators and the facility managers all together to provide their feedback. And it was great feedback. Some of the measures that they weren't too crazy about, we tried to clarify things, refine them, that made it suitable for them, as well as adding measures that were important specifically to that municipality. So again, here's the opportunity to get everyone's perspective. So you get questions, concerns addressed early on, making sure that it's comprehensive enough to address most people's issues, so that there's buy-in along the way. So again, very valuable meetings that will be proved to be useful if you go down this path. Next slide. So we talked about some of the on several occasions the operational or low-cost measures, if you will. We talked about the first one there quite a bit. The first one is really about the pool evaporation rate. So getting the air temperature, relative humidity, and the water temperature in sync with each other is important. Typically, you would want to be 2 to 4 degrees, the air temperature 2 to 4 degrees above the water temperature, and the relative humidity. The higher you're able to do that, and closer to the 60% mark, without creating, moisture problems with the envelope, you could reduce your evaporation rate. So that was a key one. As you can see, I pointed out beforehand, the pool evaporation is a big problem, a big area, or at least emissions producer, if you will. Some unoccupied setback opportunity there as well. Need to try to balance that. Again, we're trying to reduce the pool evaporation based on those three factors there. But you have to sort of weigh that against the space heating requirements. So if you increase your temperature, for instance, the air temperature, your space heating requirements goes up, so you get two fighting forces. So now, one of the opportunities is to do that when it's not cold outside, so that you can get the best of both worlds, right? So again, makeup water, we found that in some cases that there was too much makeup water being consumed. Pool pumping, we talked about pool filtration rates. Again, an opportunity to install VFDs, optimize ventilation, good opportunity over there. And we'll get into a little bit more of the details of the specific items over there. And demand control ventilation was an option, not so much in the pools, but these are community centers. So many of these community centers had meeting rooms or rooms that had variable occupancy. So a good opportunity there for saving. These typically don't cost that much. So again, we focus on trying to get these performed early on because there's low cost associated and usually pretty good returns with them. Okay. Building automation system, touched upon it beforehand. BAS is really critical for smart operation of the facility. Again, we're fortunate enough that every building had some degree of building automation system. Some of the observations, pool dehumidifier was not really typically integrated well with the rest of the building automation system for the building. So again, opportunities presented itself there. Strategies, sequences of operation, always opportunity there. As we touched upon some of the areas beforehand, and some of them had trend logs and archiving, but for the most part, we'd like to see longer and more archiving capability so that you can analyze things and watch trends, so you can fine tune your building. Next slide. So I want to highlight, we talked about systems before, where most of the measures and the implications they had on emissions. These are the high impact measures, getting into the bit of the specifics. So automatic pool covers. That's an area of which we know that pool covers can be problematic if they're manual, but there's good opportunities there are good automatic pool covers available that can be easily put on and removed. So they're not very cumbersome, and you can save quite a bit of emissions. Again, 7% on average, based on the cohort studies that we did. Again, one of the bigger ones too is the next one, gas-fired appliances, really, and using air source heat pumps as backup, getting them off of the high emissions gas consumption that we're talking about. And same thing with the domestic hot water. Again, both of them, represent quite a bit of reduction by going this route. And rooftop units too. Again, we're starting to see a lot of use or recommendations to use replacing gas-fired rooftop units with heat pump equivalents with backup, because you're going to need backup in certain cold climates more than others, some more than others. Talked about heat recovery before, so we made use of that. Energy recovery ventilator, 7%, as much as the pool cover generally. So good opportunity there, especially in change rooms where you typically exhaust all of that air and it's 100% outside air. And then we talked about, we didn't talk too much about efficient plumbing fixtures, but most of these facilities, a lot of showers are being used, a lot of domestic hot water is being used. There was opportunity to use more efficient shower heads and faucets. And again, we talked last item there, spent quite a bit of time on it, optimizing them. Again, very low cost, and you get 3% of the emissions reduction there. Just again, low cost type of measures. Next slide. So we're going to get into some of the key measures in each of the systems. So we talked a lot about this, but I just wanted to break them up into categories that we've shown them beforehand. So again, the key measures in heating and cooling are replacing gas-fired boilers with air source heat pumps, using auxiliary heating. Same thing with gas-fired rooftop units. Same thing, just getting off of natural gas, and then opportunity for optimization of the rooftop units. So these are where you can make some of the improvements in the sequences of operation that we highlighted before. Next slide. Ventilation key measures. So again, energy recovery ventilator. I talked about that. There were several, usually good opportunity here if you don't have one already to install one for the change rooms. And then demand control ventilation. We talked about that in ancillary rooms in these community centers often had variable occupancy. So there was an opportunity to use demand control ventilation and optimize the greenhouse gas emissions associated with those mechanical systems. Next slide. Domestic hot water. Again, replacing the gas-fired heaters with air source heat pump. We're seeing more and more of this being there. And again, you need to consider auxiliary electric heating, but this one here is getting better and better in terms of the temperatures that you need to produce with the current capabilities of these. So there isn't too much of a need for backup as there used to be, but again, they're just getting better and better, so minimizing the requirement or the amount of auxiliary heating. Next slide. Swimming pool key measures. Again, we touched upon these a little bit, but just some of the key highlights. Dehumidifiers, there's a lot of the new dehumidifiers there actually take advantage of heating or recovering the heat from the exhaust air, as well as the pool dehumidification process, so that you can preheat the outside air that you bring in. Pool air temperature, humidity. Again, that second main bullet there is about optimizing those temperature set points. Again, that doesn't take too much to change, but really getting those right is important because you can significantly impact that. Talked about automatic pool covers, because pool evaporation is one of the most energy uses in a pool. So if you put a pool cover over it, 90 to 95% of the pool evaporation can be reduced during that unoccupied period. Pool pumping, we talked about turnover rates. Again, we use VFDs for that. Pool water makeup, try not to exceed the local health regulations, and pool filtration, some minor improvements when considering replacing them with more efficient filtration systems that have reduced pressure drops. Okay. So highlighting electrical measures and considerations. So typically, focusing on reducing electricity in the long run anyways, so typically not save emissions, but you need to take all that into consideration. So some of the typical measures that were considered, mainly electrical in nature, if you will, were or LED lighting and occupancy sensors. A bit of opportunities, but generally these facilities, that was done reasonably well. Active power management is something that we were contemplating and considered and evaluated. There's with a lot of new renewable resources coming on the grid, there's the quality of the power is going to be getting worse, if you will, and having some sort of power conditioning devices, if you will help that. And the ones that we were looking at, they actually deal with voltage regulation, phase adjustment, and do some power factor correction. And these lead to more reliability of the equipment, as well as improves the longevity of it. So that you correct all these different things here, and your equipment tends to last longer. And there's always some energy savings associated with it. That will depend on the specific power that goes into this facility. Electrical infrastructure, again, this one I want to highlight quite a bit. This is extremely important. In this one over here, electrification obviously requires investigating electrical capacity and I guess investigating infrastructure with the LDC specifically. We're seeing more and more, depending on the location, of feeder limitations, so the ability being limited. So this one here is the one to be really careful with, and because these can be very costly, or in some cases the LDC is not quite ready to expand that. So something to consider, especially with the boiler replacement and auxiliary type heating. What we're seeing is a transition. If capacity can't be increased, at least not in the short run. Eventually, they're going to have to deal with it in the long run, the LDCs. But in the short run, we're seeing some hybrid systems. So going to air source heat pumps, but using natural gas as a backup, where you get most of it from a clean grid. So again, just some thoughts to consider, and keep this in mind. This is a big one. Next slide. Envelope measures. There's probably some myths out there that envelope is typically a good area. Typically, our analysis showed that exterior wall insulation, roof insulation, and window replacement typically, are fairly costly. We did consider them. Air tightness improvements typically were okay, and the most costly of all these ones here. But typically, other factors really would drive the envelope measures. That typically, other than just emission savings, so the cost per emissions saved, if you will, is pretty high. But we considered them anyways. Next slide. Renewables, as we mentioned, is one of the four different stages that we looked at. And so we looked at solar photovoltaics. Again, these buildings, because they're community centers, pools, they have a large roof area, makes them really, really attractive to put on solar PV, at least on the roof. Need to consider structural implications. But for the majority of the ones, the designs of them and the angles of incidence just make it there's been a lot less requirement to have to upgrade your structural, but you need to obviously check that. Solar thermals pools generally are good applications for solar water. Just the unfortunate part here is that you're in competition. It too is in competition with the roof area. So solar voltaics versus solar thermal. So we found, at least in where the geography where we were at, that the use of solar voltaics just made a little bit more financial sense if you had to choose between them. The solar walls were also considered, evaluated, but it was difficult to find the appropriate orientations to put these. And the solar wall would actually heat the outside air that goes into a dehumidifier or pool ventilation system. So again, just a little bit challenging to make it work in these facilities. We also evaluated geothermal, found in existing buildings, generally it's pretty costly to install, and usually, relatively speaking, less attractive financially than air source heat pumps. At least that was our finding with these four projects. Next slide. Other measures, again, we talked about plumbing fixtures, low flow faucets, shower heads can save quite a bit. considerable domestic hot water, and again, showers are used a lot in these facilities. So there again, sometimes this is overlooked, but there's an opportunity here for reducing domestic hot water loads and saving reasonable greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. So some of the measures considered but dismissed. Again, we've been talking about them along the way, but just a bit of a summary. So, replacing gas-fired equipment with more efficient gas-fired equipment. We tried to stay away from that. The opportunity to say, try to use more air source heat pumps. Replacement of gas-fired equipment with 100% electric. Again, air source heat pumps. Cold climate air source heat pumps are better financially from a utility cost perspective. Solar thermal walls and solar thermal and solar walls we talked about. We just couldn't make it work really well. Geothermal, ground source heat pumps, again, too costly. At least we found in these projects, and usually for existing buildings, it's a little bit more difficult. And envelope measures, other than air tightness, weren't very cost effective. Again, unless there was a need to do it, if windows needed to be replaced because they were broken or they just were falling apart. But generally, as a measure for greenhouse gas emissions, they just didn't have a great cost, or they had a high cost per emission saved for them. Next slide. Good, lots of information there. So, and I know that the actual slide deck will be shared and put on the website as well. So, anyways, go ahead, Jillian. I've talked a lot.
Thanks very much, Frank, and appreciate all of this when you're struggling with your voice there today. Mm-hmm. So lots of technical information, and we have a lot of questions, which we will try to get to at the end. Although, Frank, if you were able to answer some in the Q&A, that would be excellent while you're at it. So I now have the delightful privilege of speaking to our three municipalities that participated in the pilot with us. I have with me Adam McMullen from City of Barrie, Deepak Adhikari from City of Richmond Hill, and Curtis Dina from City of Brampton. So here are your experts, great people to talk to about specifics because they've been through this at least once or twice, are now old hands, experts at all of this. So we're going to get the opportunity to ask them a bunch of questions about the process. And at the end, I'll open it up so you can ask them questions as well. So first, I am going to ask questions of all of them. So if everyone could give me a relatively short answer for each of the questions, that would be terrific. So I'll start with Adam from City of Barrie. Could you tell me what you learned through the study process and what were some of the biggest insights for you?
Thanks, Jillian, and thanks for inviting me on the panel. There's a few things, but I guess there's two sides to the study, and one is the actual, technical analysis and understanding your building. But I guess what I learned, and which was an outcome of this process, is the people side, and net zero and carbon emission reduction and GHG reduction for a lot of people is foreign. It's new to them. They're not aware or have a full understanding of what that means. So this process, the integrated design process, the milestone process, where you have meetings with your operators, you have meetings with different staff, actually serves as an opportunity to bring them along the pathway of learning and normalizing what net zero is. And honestly, if you ask people what net zero is, they don't really understand. I honestly have trouble describing it sometimes. So I found actually one of the biggest findings from this whole activity was not the actual technical findings, but was the process by which you had to integrate different people within the organization through this process. And I found it enlightening because in some cases, having a technical webinar with staff worked really well, but other times you want to have an in-person meeting that's more interactive. So that was one of the biggest kind of challenges and findings and opportunities I found going through this process.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that. Can I flip over to Deepak? Can you answer the same question? What did you learn through the study process and what were the insights for you?
Yeah, so as compared to the previous studies that were done in the past, this study was more on looking for opportunities to identify greenhouse gas emission reduction opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. So the previous audits were mainly focused on energy savings, but this was more on greenhouse gas emission reduction opportunities and looking at how we can get to our net zero target by 2050. And then these are just 2 facilities that we participate in this program, the 2 pools, but we have 4 other pools, and how we can utilize the recommendations from these audits. How we can replicate the similar ideas in other facilities, right? Like Adam said, having staff from various divisions within the corporation, having them involved right from the beginning, and then seeking their buy-in was important. So they are also they become aware and then become familiar for what is coming up and what is being planned and what is there that the city is looking for to get to net zero by 2050. So those and then one other thing that I found was that obviously net zero by 2050, for those GHG reduction measures, the capital costs are pretty high. And so that is where we needed to engage staff from our finances and our facility management responsible for implementing the measures, right from the beginning. So yeah, so staff engagement, all appropriate stakeholders engagement, and not only looking at next 5 years, but over the horizon up to by 2050 was the key from this study.
Great, thanks,
Thank you.
Deepak. Curtis, what's your insight?
Thanks, Jillian, and thanks to InnerLife and the GMF guys to support us. For City of Brampton, there are a number of things that we have seen, through this initiative. I endorse what both other participants said before, Adam and Deepak. In addition to that, I think what came out to us was that it's important, that when you're assessing a facility, you recognize that each facility is unique, right? And there might be measures that are seeming to be very ideal for implementation, but there are other factors that you need to consider when you're looking to implement these measures if you're going to go forward, and that is how practical they are. Are they feasible based on the infrastructure of the facility? The cost that's involved, timeline for implementation, other things such as potentially regulatory or policy changes in the local or global environment that could potentially impact your measure, right? There's also the need for us to look at optimizing or improving our current situation prior to developing, the measures themselves, right? Because you might find yourself oversizing measures, whereas there are opportunities to lower your cost and then get into that area of adequately sizing your new measures or equipment to meet your actual needs, right? Because it's about, the efficiency, right? So we got to focus on that, and we recognize that that's very important. Again, in terms of implementation, we've adopted basically the federal targets for GHG emissions reductions. And so it's important for us to establish an implementation roadmap to achieve incremental benefits. So that's a very critical thing that you need to focus on. Set your targets, create roadmaps, and implement accordingly to achieve those targets, right? So a lot of things there too, more things, but not enough time to talk about all of them. Yeah. And just one correction, my name is spelled incorrectly on the slide, so it's Deenah.
So sorry, Curtis. We'll get that fixed for the final one that goes out. Thanks very much for that. So next question, and I'll start with Deepak. How are you making the business or financial case for implementing these measures internally? What's the biggest selling point, or how are you selling these internally?
At the city, we have a corporate energy team of staff from energy and waste section, from the PWO, Public Works Operations. We have facility management group, who is responsible for implementing the measures, the capital measures, and we have Recreation and Culture Division responsible for operating the facilities and also implementing the operational measures, low cost, no cost operational measures, right? So what we're thinking is that the recommendations that came out of these audits that we're gonna, although they were involved during the integrated design process, but we'll be discussing these measures with the team internally and then to prioritize and select the measure that we're gonna proceed. So the initially we were thinking just maybe just focusing on the low cost, no cost, the operational measures. And since, like I said earlier, the net zero, like the high emission reduction measures involve high capital investment. So for that, we need to engage staff from our finance division and also from other divisions like capital asset management planning and sustainability. So we're going to have a wide range of staff from various divisions involved and then go through the measures. And then since like for Wavy Hill, for example, I can tell you that total cost to get to net zero is close to $11 million. So we definitely need to bring this up to all the relevant stakeholders' attention, and to higher management also eventually need to seek approval from council. So starting off with the low cost, no cost, and also some of the low capital intensive measures that we are now heading towards updating our a 5-year corporate energy plan, which is due July 1st of next year. So we are thinking about maybe those aggressive the measures. Any of those we can incorporate in our next 5-year plan update, and then how we can stagger the rest of the measures over the longer time range, like by 2050. Yeah. Right. So then all the saving that we would accrue from implementing the measures in the initial years, we can save that money to implement for the future, like the high capital intensive measures. And also we'll seek all the available funding from the FCM and ISO, and maybe if needed any support from mayors, make a challenge in like also how we can consolidate. And then, like I said earlier, like these 2 facilities, we have other 4 swimming pools, how we can just like consolidate all the measures that we can come up with if we implement the same measures in the rest of the 4 facilities as a whole, as a portfolio of full facilities, and what is the total dollar value we're looking at, and how we can manage that to manage the cost of the capital cost.
Yeah, it's big for sure. Absolutely. Curtis, what's your insight into how you're making the business case internally?
One of the things that the city is focusing right now is development of our ECDM plan and identifying or developing a net zero pathway. We've been collaborating internally with various stakeholders within our building design and construction department. We basically, through budget preparation, identify in alignment with state of good repair projects, what are our strategies in terms of net zero retrofit implementation. And so getting support in terms of funding, we're identifying opportunities where we can apply for grant funding. We have a unit that's set up now that's focusing on looking at those opportunities that are out there, and working collaboratively to develop proposals to access funding. So there is a broad-based approach. Sensitization of stakeholders is another core area that we're trying to focus on, because again, getting everyone to be on board is a big challenge, especially when a lot of people don't understand what getting to net zero is. And so that's another component, building that awareness. And in terms of training of our stakeholders, the operations team, it is a very critical component. And so there is a focus, even from a building automation systems perspective, to get our operations team more, better trained and become familiar with some of the technologies also that are being proposed. So, for example, air source heat pumps, integration of geothermal systems within your facility. A number of these technologies, a lot of the have not necessarily been implemented within a lot of the facilities. And so, we need to consider the sustainable maintenance and life of those equipment or measures that are being implemented, so that we don't find ourselves incurring higher costs later down. Right. So those are some of the things that we're focusing on. We're competing against other priorities, within a municipality. There are so many other priorities that are being weighed against projects that are being implemented for net zero. And so is what makes the best financial sense sometimes.
Right.
Looking at the low cost measures is the first priority that we take on board and see how we can implement those right away. And then even using pilot projects as a business case. We're using, for example, currently the Susan Fennell net zero retrofit project as one of those pilot projects, so to speak, to sort of identify how do we move forward with these technologies.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Thanks, Curtis. That's excellent. Adam, any thoughts to add into this mix of how you're making the business case internally for these measures?
Yeah, and obviously I echo everything that's been said so far. I think one thing is you have to demonstrate value to your colleagues, and that has to be internally, that has to be through council. And you do that by saving money on utility budgets, by saving money. And then once people have a bit of faith and understanding that there's value in participating with you, they will take the time. So there's almost a preamble activity of being effective in kind of the pure energy management terms of generating ROI and returns for the corporation and your colleagues. And then when you bring them something, they're not going to say, okay, well, they've saved us money in the past, so let's consider this. The other thing, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get ahead of the capital planning process, or when we do replace a piece of equipment that we know is failing, that is part of the initial design and ask is that we are asking for the low carbon option. And we're not asking for more money. We're not asking for different money. We're saying this is what we want, and it's part of the capital process. So when it gets through the the capital review, all of that, our boiler is now a heat pump in a boiler as a backup. And it's just the project we're asking for. We need to replace this piece of equipment. It needs renewed. We are asking for this. And it's not like we're asking for a premium. This is what we need. And in that case, it's just part of your standard operating procedure. It is very challenging because there's so much equipment being replaced. You have to get ahead of all of it. So just having your net zero analysis scenario evaluations and options understood and costed out and pre-designed so that you can inform the capital project and budgeting process. So that's the business as usual. Then you don't have this question at some point is, well, what does this cost? What is the premium? It's already as part of the whole package. And that's what I'm trying to do on a case-by-case basis, asset-by-asset basis as a kind of net zero over time approach.
Thanks, Adam. That's actually really helpful too. Yeah, great answers from everyone. I think it's definitely a big challenge, a lot of competing interests, and looking at the low cost first and making that business case is all part of it. But I like where you're going, Adam, making it normalizing it. So last question, any advice regarding getting funding, or I think you've spoken to this a little bit, but maybe a bit more around getting funding or moving forward. You've started to talk to this, maybe Curtis, anything else on that? Any thoughts about implementation? We're all very excited about accelerating action on this.
Yeah, well, I always believe that, well, some people say money is not free, but free money is good money, right? And there are a number of, carbon funds available that we could tap into potentially. There are various criterion to access these funding, and sometimes you got to weigh, is it worth the effort? But it's worth giving a try sometimes if it's feasible. So that's one approach. Secondly, in terms of, getting your alignment to your state of good repair or asset renewal strategy, getting your net zero strategy aligned to that, right, is very critical, because again, you don't want to necessarily be, stressed out in terms of identifying where funding is coming from to implement measures. You need to establish a structured plan. And so aligning that, with your state of good repair and your capital projects is very, very important, and getting that buy-in from, your city councilors, to do that implementation. The other thing is you need to also look at what are the savings that you're actually going to be achieving financially from implementation of some of these measures. Can we take those savings, financial savings, and throw back into our net zero budget, right? That's something that needs to be considered, because, it will help. If you were to continue on a business as usual situation, you would have been incurring those costs. And so, you're taking that money that you're saving now to help you to save more with other initiatives. And so that's some of the strategies that I think we need to focus on, going forward, and making sure that we do not try to even again duplicate efforts and reinventing the wheel. We need to collaborate, and basically I find within even some municipalities, you might find that you have a department with some specific mandates and deliverables, right? But yet they're not aligned to the net zero strategy. And so there might be one department implementing a particular project, but another department is doing something else which does not align. So you might have 8 RTUs to replace at a facility. The department that has responsibility is going to do a like for like, but they're not recognizing that there's an impact on, you put in these RTUs, they're going to be there for 15, 20 years, right? Can we move to put in, more efficient technologies that will be there and providing better benefits? So there needs to be structured alignment and, making sure that you are achieving those targets with the best approach and collaborative approach.
Thanks, Curtis. Adam, any thoughts about moving forward, getting funding?
Yes, I echo the great comment about getting free money. Council and senior management loves to hear about getting grants. You got $300,000 to do some studies, and that builds leverage. When you do your intake form or your capital request or something, and you reference that you recently got this money to support a feasibility analysis, this has offset this cost. By the way, we are now asking for a project that will further save money or save emissions or reduce emissions. It's the goodwill that comes from grant money that you leverage to the next action. And I find when you do get grant money in that's when you try to ask for some stuff, and you have that narrative flow through that, because it demonstrates you're bringing money and revenue back to the corporation, the municipality, and everybody loves the good news story. And when they read the capital form, they read the request that you're bringing, and you reference that, oh, we got money to support the feasibility analysis that is now implementing this particular project. That is a good pairing. So there is value in chasing revenue and grants. They are terribly painful to manage. They are bureaucratic. They take a lot of time. So if you think, you have to understand the resource requirements to managing grant process, to reporting requirements, because they do take time and they're not as simple as you think. So it is great. You make sure the value is significant enough to and go down the pathway of investing the resource to manage the grant process.
Thanks, Adam.
Deepak, may I add?
Any last thoughts?
Yeah,
Sorry.
may I just add too that there are also incentives that you can tap into. Sometimes you do some retrofits, and there are incentives that are available. That you could actually achieve some sort of funding from also, right? Sewer rebate, programs, for example. You could actually achieve a lot of savings from that. You think about the lighting retrofit incentives that are available. Just look at what is out there. And new things will come up from time to time. Just keep an eye out and always be focused in terms of getting that free money.
Thanks, Curtis. Deepak, anything to add there around moving forward with implementation or getting funding? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I just echo what Adam said about not only looking at the cost premium for these measures, just looking for what is the incremental cost compared to the business as usual cost. So that is what it would be more important, so that we can present to council, right, to seek their approval, and also utilizing the energy savings, the dollar savings from the project that are implemented, putting in a separate basket that we can use to implement the other capital intensive projects. And like Curtis mentioned, that there are other retrofit incentive available from ISO towards energy saving achieved by the project could also be factored in, and also the implementation funding from the FCM and ISO, like I said earlier, could also be explored to offset the capital cost to improve the payback and have the NPV number look better. So all that, and also in the business case, incorporating all those like the incentive funding and then the energy saving that the project will provide and the recurring savings. If we could incorporate in that way, then we can we can get better buy-in from higher management and council to implement these projects. Yeah.
Thanks. Yes, I think showing that you're doing everything you can to reduce the cost takes it a long way for sure. Fantastic. Thank you very much for this. We're going to now open up to, we've had a lot of questions, so we're going to move to the question period. I'd ask that you all just stay on if some of the questions are directed at you. Frank, could you also hop on, because I think some of them are technical. So I'll start with the first one in the Q&A, which is, does the heat recovery included use the economizer to get the optimal temperature fresh air to cool down the interior instead of AC, which is heated by solar gain through windows in the summers?
Yeah, I guess the question I'm not sure fully understand, but when we talked about heat recovery, the dehumidifier itself, yeah, we know that it does heat recovery for the dehumidification process, and then we would look at to see if it's better to use outside air. In that case, we found very not sure how rarely does it make sense to use it, but there's an opportunity for optimizing the economizer piece when it makes sense to use more outside air when it helps the situation. Just the problem is that with outside air, you start to use more greenhouse gas emissions for heating, because you need to heat up that air. So generally, we try to stay away from that. The heat recovery opportunities that we talked about, that we focused mainly on, other than the dehumidifier, were the change rooms, is that they typically needed to be exhausted and had other opportunities over there for doing recovery. You don't want to be exhausting 100% outside air without extracting the heat from it. So there was good opportunities pretty well at most of the facilities to do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There have been a lot of questions. We won't be able to get to all of them. I do want to ask a couple questions that our fabulous panelists can answer as well. Just putting it out to, and whoever would like to speak first, was there a request to use natural gas for as a backup for winter heating peaks? And if not chosen, can you summarize that? Was that part of the decision-making process? Was there anything in your municipalities about, I know that's been talked about a bit, about whether you use natural gas as a backup in your air source heat pump or not? Any thoughts on that? Any of our lovely panelists?
I could speak to that.
Yeah, fabulous.
In addition to this net zero study, we've done another 8 and on our buildings. So there are a lot of on the different pathways. You can have a short term, you can have an asset management pathway or a 20-year pathway or whatever it may be. A lot of them have an interim step where the first step is electrifying through a heat pump while maintaining an existing asset of natural gas. That on a cost basis is often superior, because you don't have to size your heat pump for the worst case scenario. You don't have to have an electric boiler backup that causes a service upgrade. So you could get a good chunk of emissions reductions without the full elimination of natural gas. So that is an option, and you can stage your implementation plan accordingly. But that also depends on your assets and when they're renewed. And if you're going for full 100%, you'll have to get rid of that backup. But conceivably down the road, heat pumps might get more effective down to a lower temperature. But we found that there is a sweet spot by which you can have your design days of 5 or 6 days a year where you need, the gas backup, and you use gas, but then you're getting your emissions down, in the 80-90%. So it is a good interim option and is a good financial option at this point in some cases. In some cases, buildings, you could forego that and go with the pure technology electrification. But in some cases, especially pools that have energy intense heating requirements, maintaining a bit of that infrastructure can be a good option.
Great. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Julian, just to add to that, sometimes we have measures, and again, it comes back to the point in terms of assessing what is practical. based on a number of factors, the infrastructure that's in place. For Ching Wellness, for example, which was part of this project, there are several measures that required electrical infrastructure upgrade, which would cost us probably $1 million, right? At least, right? To do that, to implement some of these measures. Now, these measures are measures actually that would bring higher GHG emissions reductions, right? So is it practical to go ahead with those measures is the question, based on your current infrastructure, the cost that's involved, the time. All of those are things that we're focusing on, right? You know, as Adam said, you might need to find that sweet spot, because you know, you need also to weigh, is it worth doing retrofits or implementing these measures as opposed to doing a new construction, right? Because those are some of the things that we need to consider, because you're spending, for example, let's say you're going to spend $20–30 million to do the retrofit, and doing a new facility that is fully net zero, you know, is going to cost you, you know, $35 million. With a longer term impact, right? So we got to weigh those, but natural gas use is not something that within a short term that, you know, might be practical to eliminate completely. And so there are areas that you might need to have a natural gas backup, so to speak, you know, and then looking at phasing that out over a longer term period, right? So there needs to be a structured plan. So, you know, supporting what Adam said for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's great feedback, and it is something we've seen. It's a challenge for each project for sure. There was a question about pool wastewater and makeup. Was that taken into account in the calculations for optimization, or was that discussed in your sessions? Frank, do you want to start with that, and then maybe we'll get other feedback?
Yes, there were a few buildings for sure that already had it, and there were just opportunities for optimizing them. But yeah, we definitely recommend doing that piece of it as well. Again, there was a few of the buildings that had that, and there were just opportunities for optimizing it based on what we noticed was actually occurring with those units. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any of our participants, was that discussed?
So I guess like these two facilities, I just got the draft report, so still reviewing it. So not sure that has been recommended, but we have a facility that we did implement a pilot project in a separate, different pool facility, wherein we can just have the facility operator just key in the number of bathers, that the system will take care of how much water to discharge from the pool and add into the pool. And by doing that, also recover the waste heat from the pool that can be used to preheat the makeup water. Yeah, so yeah, we have that, but we're still reviewing the report and see what that has been recommended.
That sounds interesting. Thanks, Deepak. That's
so one other thing that I found in the pilot project that we had was that the system did incorporate the waste recovery side of things, but didn't take into account of how much water being evaporated from the pool, right? So by that, this system just discharges 15 liters per bather per day of water out of the pool, and add the same amount of water, but doesn't take into account of how much water was being evaporated. So from that, our assessment was that we're not saving anything from a water side, but definitely making some saving from energy, recovery side of things.
Okay.
Jillian, I can just add real quickly. We consider this the one challenge is at our one facility is that when the wastewater is being drained, and I assume this is recovering the heat from the wastewater, we don't necessarily are filling our pool at that time. So you need to be filling your pool so the cold water exchanges with the wastewater that goes down the drain. And that was our challenge, is how do you time that up? And if you don't time it up, then the wastewater is going down the drain, then you fill later, you're not gaining the heat exchange. So that was the challenge. So we haven't really done that, although that might be just a circumstance and I might be missing something.
No, that's really, really interesting. So it's really around the operational piece that's really challenging there. Okay, interesting. That's
it's just interesting. If I can just add that one of the things that we know, just a Deepak's comment as well, was that that's where we found there was opportunities for water makeup optimization because again, water was being drained, not taking into consideration the pool evaporation. But if you could take into consideration the pool evaporation, then you can reduce your water makeup to meet just the needs to meet the occupational safety standards for it. So there is an opportunity over there to do that.
Great. Okay.
One of the things that we've heard from our operators is that having them like making sure that they use appropriate amount of water, but unless there is a system in place, how they can do that is kind of a challenging thing for them. They always say, I know I need to add 15 liters of water per bather per day, but I don't have a way to make sure that I end up adding the same amount of water. So unless I have a system in place that can help me do that. So that's where we just implemented that pilot project. But like I said, that is definitely, as Adam said, the timing is important to allow time to recover the heat, waste heat from the discharge water. And yeah, so, and then also considering the amount, the water saving opportunity also in that should also be looked at.
Great. Thanks. That's really helpful. Yeah, really, really interesting. And I think lots of opportunity there. Frank, really quickly, were Save on Energy and Enbridge incentives included in the financials that we put together? So we're incentives.
So our recommendation generally was that when the timing of a lot of these measures were sometimes a year or two, a few years out. And so these programs here, they're uncertain beyond a certain shelf life, if you will. So we made it clear that our measures didn't include those, but we recommended in all cases to investigate the incentives that are available at the time. So if some of the measures are going to be implemented soon, these Save on Energy and Enbridge incentives may last. I mean, there's obviously EPP. There's a whole bunch of them that would be helpful in this case over here, but there are life expectancies to those. I think some of them actually terminate the end of next year, right? So we just tried to present that, but we encourage them to look at the incentives as it aligned with when they envision to implement these, right? Because a lot of them started in the earliest was 2024. Most of them started 2025 and onwards.
Yeah. Okay. We do have questions. We will provide. I know we're kind of at the end of time here, and we do have a quick survey that will be sent to you as you to answer just as we pop out of the webinar. I do want to be respectful of people's time and give people a second to answer the survey, which provides great feedback to FCM. We will provide a Q&A document when we post this on our website. We do post the recordings of all of our webinars. It's on our website, on the Mayor's Megawatt Challenge website. And we will also post a Q&A document that, because some of these questions are quite specific, Frank's provided some answers in the Q&A, and there's some in the chat as well. But we want to thank our panelists very, very much. Appreciate all of your insights. It's so great to hear from you directly. Thank you also to Frank, who had a lot of had to work through a lot of technical material. Thanks to FCM for allowing us this opportunity to put this on. And thank all of you for attending. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Great initiative.
Everyone.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Well, thanks.